What we're experiencing is debt fatigue. Debt fatigue occurs when a country allows its spending to grow more rapidly than national income. And that's been happening in the US for half a century. The problem, of course, is this is not sustainable. We end up with stagflation and risk of default on the debt, which is where we are at this point. Clearly, as David Walker said, our fiscal rules are not working. The statutory rules in place simply have failed. So the question is, what works? And we need to look at the experience of some countries that have had some success in addressing debt fatigue. And without question, the most successful country and the most successful fiscal rule is the Swiss debt brake. And the Swiss have had this fiscal rule in place for 2 decades now, and they have reduced their debt as a share of GDP. They balanced their budget. They've solved the problem of debt fatigue. And there are several reasons why the Swiss debt brake, is the most effective rule in the world. First of all, it's a constitutional rule. The Swiss passed the Swiss debt brake through a referendum with 85% support from the Swiss people. Secondly, it imposes an expenditures cap. Government spending cannot grow more rapidly than the national income. Thirdly, it balances the budget over the business cycle. This means that the country can incur deficits in a period of recession, but they must be offset by surpluses in periods of economic growth. And this is where the deficit brake comes in. If the deficits reach a critical level, they must reduce that spending cap. And then they must allocate surplus revenue to repay or offset those deficits. As I said, this Swiss debt brake has been in place now for 2 decades, and the Swiss have created one of the most vibrant economies in the world. They have economic stability, and the Swiss debt brake has been copied in other European countries and by the European Union. So in our research, we asked the question, what would happen in the US if we introduced a Swiss-style debt brake? And we use a dynamic simulation model, excuse me, to estimate the impact of a Swiss-style debt brake in the US. If we had introduced this type of fiscal rule 2 decades ago like the Swiss, we in fact would be pretty much where the Swiss are. We would have been able to eliminate debt fatigue. We would have kept the growth of spending in line with the growth of income, and we would not have the debt burden that we have today. Our problem, of course, today is it's going to be much more difficult to impose this kind of fiscal rule and fiscal discipline. It will be very challenging. Nonetheless, our analysis shows that with this kind of fiscal rule in place, over the next 2 decades, we could balance the budget and stabilize debt as a share of GDP. Well, this will be challenging. It will require a much slower growth of government spending and, of course, fundamental reform of all spending programs, especially entitlement programs. We don't think Congress is up to this challenge. Congress has had half a century to introduce more effective fiscal rules. They failed to do so. They failed to introduce or propose a fiscal responsibility amendment. So the best prospect for an effective fiscal responsibility amendment is through an Article 5 amendment convention. And of course, we've made progress in both Congress and in the state legislatures this year in proposals for an Article 5 amendment convention to enact a fiscal responsibility amendment. So this is a great opportunity. We know that the government is too big, it's too expensive, it's too intrusive in our lives. We can't live with debt fatigue forever. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning